There is a specific kind of moment that happens when financial pressure reaches a threshold. Not panic. Panic is loud and acute. This is quieter. You are sitting somewhere at a kitchen table, in a parked car, at a screen at 11 at night, staring at numbers that do not add up. You know the numbers. You have run them before. Income, obligations, what is committed, what is overdue, what is coming. The math does not work. And in that moment, a thought arrives that feels like clarity. I need to sit down and think about this properly. I need to make a plan. That thought feels correct. It feels like what competent people do when a real problem demands real attention. Here is what I am going to show you today. The moment when you most need clear financial thinking is precisely the moment when financial stress has made clear thinking biologically harder. This is not a motivation problem. This is not about character. It is a documented mechanism with a measurable effect on cognitive performance, and there is an industry positioned at exactly the point where that effect is most severe. The prevailing belief about financial stress is that it functions as a catalyst. That pressure creates clarity. That when the stakes are real, people rise to meet them. They get serious. They cut through the noise. They make the rational decisions they had been deferring. This belief is embedded in the architecture of almost all mainstream financial advice. The assumption beneath phrases like live within your means and build a budget and make a plan is that the person hearing those instructions has full cognitive capacity to execute on them, that what has been missing is information or discipline or awareness, not capability. Financial stress in this framing is a motivator, the thing that finally forces clarity, the catalyst for a turning point. The cultural narrative goes further. It treats financial struggle as a forge, the pressure that separates people who rise from people who do not. Stories of financial recovery almost always include a moment of maximum crisis, followed by a moment of decisive clarity. A person looks at the damage, gets honest with themselves, and makes a decisive change. That story assumes the mind operates at peak capacity during peak pressure, that the conditions that make a decision hard are the same conditions that sharpen the person making it. That assumption has been directly tested in controlled conditions with measurable outcomes. What the research found is not what the story predicts. Think about the financial decisions you made during the most difficult period of your life. Not the panic decisions, those are obvious in retrospect. The deliberate ones, the decisions you made carefully after sitting with the problem for several days or weeks, that you believed at the time were the rational choice. How many of them, looking back, were actually the right call? There is a specific quality to that retrospective recognition, the feeling of examining a decision made under financial pressure and noticing that something in the calculation was off. The logic was there, the effort was real, and still, the decision did not hold up. This happens across income levels, across education levels. A person earning $45,000 a year takes a high-interest loan to cover an unexpected expense, selects the fastest option rather than the most favorable one, and later cannot reconstruct why they did not search more carefully. A person earning $130,000 rolls a credit card balance for 14 months instead of liquidating an underperforming account, and later cannot explain the reasoning. A homeowner defers a maintenance decision that costs 4 times as much 18 months later, knowing at the time that deferral is happening. The standard explanation is behavioral: insufficient discipline, inadequate planning, irrational behavior under pressure. But that explanation skips a question. Why does the quality of financial decisions deteriorate specifically at the moments when financial pressure is highest? Why do capable, experienced people consistently make their worst financial calls at their worst financial moments? There is also a temporal pattern worth naming. These failures cluster. The worst financial decision of a stressful year rarely happens in isolation. It is surrounded by others, each slightly less recoverable than the one before. The aggregate damage is never what any single decision, examined alone, would suggest. The sequence itself is part of the mechanism. That correlation between peak pressure and degraded decision quality is not a coincidence. It is the mechanism. In 2013, Researchers Sendhil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir published findings from a series of studies on the cognitive effects of scarcity. The question was precise. Does experiencing scarcity of money, of time, of other limited resources measurably affect cognitive performance? The results were quantifiable. People operating under conditions of financial scarcity performed significantly worse on cognitive assessments. The researchers measured an impairment equivalent to approximately 13 IQ points in some conditions. To calibrate that number, it is a comparable cognitive effect to losing an entire night of sleep. They named this the bandwidth tax. The mechanism works like this. When the mind is processing an unresolved financial problem, a bill that cannot be covered, a debt that is compounding, a gap that reappears every month it cannot fully stop. The problem holds cognitive space regardless of what else is happening. It intrudes on other tasks. It pulls on attention, even when attention is consciously directed elsewhere. It cannot be set aside through effort. This is not a metaphor. Cognitive bandwidth, the mental capacity available for complex reasoning, planning, impulse control, and the parallel processing of competing information is finite. Financial stress draws on that capacity continuously. The withdrawal does not stop between decisions. Whatever the stress has consumed is not available for anything else. A separate study, published in Science in 2013 by Anandi Mani and colleagues, measured this in a field context. Farmers in India were assessed on cognitive performance before harvest at their point of maximum financial pressure, and after harvest, when financial pressure had decreased. The same individuals showed measurably better performance in the financially easier period. The difference could not be explained by changes in sleep, nutrition, or physical workload. It was explained by the presence or absence of financial stress. What degrades first under financial stress is not basic function. You can still work, still operate, still maintain surface-level performance. What gets impaired is the specific class of thinking that financial decisions demand, evaluating multiple options simultaneously, projecting consequences across time, maintaining long-term priorities against immediate pressure, and resisting a short-term solution that worsens the long-term position. The researchers called the attention narrowing that accompanies acute scarcity tunneling. When a resource is scarce, the mind focuses with intensity on the immediate problem. That focus carries a cost. The cognitive capacity consumed by the crisis is not available for processing what the crisis is doing to everything surrounding it. A person under acute financial pressure may be intensely focused on covering this month's gap. That focus is real and functional, but it consumes the bandwidth that would otherwise be available for evaluating the next 6 months, calculating the true cost of available options, or identifying a path that resolves the underlying condition rather than deferring it. The physiological dimension runs in parallel. Financial stress is chronic stress. Chronic stress elevates cortisol. Sustained elevated cortisol impairs function in the prefrontal cortex, the region most directly responsible for planning, long-term thinking, impulse regulation, and the weighing of competing priorities. The documented sequence is: financial pressure leads to chronic stress response, which elevates cortisol, which impairs prefrontal cortex function, which degrades decision quality, which produces worse financial outcomes, which deepens financial pressure. This is not a rhetorical cycle. It is a neurobiological loop with measurable inputs and measurable outputs. Decision fatigue adds another dimension. Under financial stress, a person makes significantly more microdecisions per day than under financial stability. What not to purchase, what to defer, what to explain and to whom, which obligation to prioritize, what can wait. Each decision draws on the same finite cognitive resource. The accumulation depletes capacity for the larger, more consequential decisions that the situation demands. Here is where the mechanism becomes a system. Financial products designed for moments of acute stress are priced to profit from the conditions that compromise the borrower's judgment. Payday loans carry annualized interest rates that the CFPB documents at a median of 391%. High-interest installment products are structured with minimum payment architectures that extend repayment periods, and maximize total interest extracted. These products are not marketed to people in states of financial calm. They are positioned at the exact moment the unexpected expense, the short paycheck, the overdue notice when the borrower's capacity to evaluate the true cost is most severely compromised. The geographic distribution of payday lending locations correlates with neighborhoods under concentrated financial stress. High-interest digital credit products are engineered for speed, rapid approval, minimal friction between the moment of stress and the moment of commitment. That friction reduction is intentional. Every step of deliberation removed is deliberation that does not happen. The system positions its most profitable extraction points at the moment of maximum cognitive impairment. That is the architecture. That question, who is waiting at every decision point where the thinking gets hardest, is what the next scenario makes visible. This is an illustrative scenario constructed to trace a documented pattern. James is 41, an IT project manager, household income $82 per year, married, 1 child, emotional state, competent and contained, but operating without margin. In February 2019, he receives a tax notice, $11,400 owed in federal tax as the result of a short consulting engagement and a withholding adjustment he had not tracked. He has $4,200 in savings. He is not in a crisis. He is in a gap. Over the next 18 months, James will make 8 fine financial decisions. Looking back from month 18, he can trace each one. He will see that several were rational in isolation. He will see that, taken together, they deepened his position rather than resolved it. He will not be able to fully explain why. In March 2019, he arranges a 6-month payment plan with the IRS at approximately $1,000 per month, including penalties. The interest rate on the arrangement is 5% annually. This is a defensible choice, and he runs the numbers before committing. But covering the IRS payment drops his discretionary margin to approximately $600 per month. He does not adjust any other spending at this point. He believes the gap is temporary. By month 3, temporary is being covered by credit. He has charged approximately $400 to an existing card at 19.9% annual interest. He tells himself it will be paid when the IRS obligation is complete. By month 5, the balance is $3,800. He has not yet calculated what the balance will be in 6 months if he pays only the minimum. His attention is on the IRS deadline, which is visible and immediate. The credit card balance feels comparatively abstract. The IRS obligation ends in August. He has $400, $100. 3 balance transfer offers have arrived in the prior 2 months. He moves the balance to a 0% promotional card. The transfer fee is $246. The post-promotional rate is 24.99%. He does not read the rate conversion terms carefully. He is, at this moment, 7 months into sustained financial pressure. His bandwidth has been taxed continuously for 7 months. He does not systematically pay down the transferred balance during the promotional period. He makes minimum payments. The urgency lifts. Urgency, it turns out, was doing some of the cognitive work. Without it, the problem becomes less visible, which is not the same as smaller. In month 13, the promotional period ends. The balance is $3,900. The rate converts to 24.99%. James does not immediately notice. He is no longer in acute crisis mode. He is in maintenance mode under continued low-level financial stress. Looks a lot like not checking. At month 18, James examines the full picture for the first time since February 2019. The original $11,400 tax liability, managed through instruments selected under cognitive impairment, has produced $2,280 in IRS penalties and interest, $246 in transfer fees, and approximately $1,800 in credit card interest. Total cost of managing the gap, $4,366, is a 38% premium on a problem he was trying to solve carefully. What James will say, looking back, he does not understand why he did not liquidate a small investment account that held $300. He does not understand why he did not read the transfer terms. He does not understand why he did not set a calendar reminder for the promotional end date. These are not complex actions. He had made more complex financial decisions without difficulty in calmer years. The mechanism says he was operating with less than he had. Scale James's scenario across income levels and replace the trigger. A medical expense, a job loss, a car failure, a separation. The mechanism is identical. The impairment is the same. The product positioned at the decision point is the same. According to the Federal Reserve's 2024 survey of economics and decision-making, 37% of U.S. adults would not be able to cover a $400 emergency expense using cash or its equivalent. This is not a measure of individual carelessness. It is a measure of how many people are operating within a margin narrow enough that a single disruption activates the cognitive conditions that make the disruption more expensive. The CFPB has documented that 80% of payday loans are not repaid within the initial 2-week loan period. The typical borrower pays $520 in total costs to borrow $375. The business model does not profit from a completed transaction. It profits from the rollover, the renewal of an obligation that, under different cognitive conditions, would have been avoided or resolved differently. The borrower in rollover is not typically someone who made a careless initial decision. They are someone who made a decision under degraded bandwidth and then remained in the conditions that sustained that impairment long enough for full extraction. The timing architecture is not neutral. These products are most heavily marketed during periods of documented stress, post-holiday debt accumulation, tax season, following publicized layoffs, in neighborhoods with elevated unemployment rates. The marketing reaches people who are, by definition, operating under conditions the research identifies as cognitively impairing. That is not accidental targeting. It is the customer profile that converts. The regulatory environment has not closed this gap. Financial products marketed during moments of acute stress are not required to disclose the cognitive conditions under which they are offered. They are not required to delay the offer until the borrower has restored processing capacity. That absence is not an oversight. The regulatory structure was shaped within the same environment as the products it governs. Consider minimum payment structures. They are calibrated to extend the repayment period as long as legally permissible. The borrower making minimum payments is not freely choosing to pay slowly. They are typically in the precise cognitive state, depleted by accumulated micro-decisions, tunneled onto immediate obligations that makes the true cost of the extended timeline invisible until it is complete. Here is what the research does not conclude, and what this is not saying. It does not conclude that financial stress eliminates judgment. It does not conclude that people under pressure cannot make good decisions. It does not conclude that anyone who accepted high-interest credit under duress was without agency. What it concludes is measurable and specific. The cognitive capacity available for complex financial reasoning is reduced under conditions of financial scarcity. The reduction targets exactly the capabilities most required for the decisions most consequential to escaping financial stress. The reframe is structural, not personal. You were told that financial struggle is a character test, that the people who navigate it successfully are the ones who think clearly under pressure, stay rational when others do not, and make the right calls when it is hardest. This framing places the outcome inside the individual, which means the failure is also inside the individual. What the mechanism shows is that the conditions of financial stress systematically impair the cognitive capacity needed to navigate financial stress. This is not a motivational failure. It is a documented input-output relationship. Financial pressure produces reduced bandwidth. Reduced bandwidth produces degraded decisions. Degraded decisions produce deeper financial pressure. The loop is not rhetorical. The products, the placement, the approval speed, the minimum payment architecture, the timing of marketing, all of it is organized around this loop, not against it. The most profitable moment in the credit cycle is the moment of maximum cognitive impairment. That is not a side effect of the product. That is the product. The advice structure built around financial difficulty, discipline, planning, careful decision-making assumes you arrive at the problem with full cognitive capacity. It does not account for the mechanism that runs underneath. The advice instructs you to think more clearly. It does not acknowledge that the stress is why clear thinking is unavailable. This is not an argument for passivity. It is an argument for accuracy. Before you assign cause to a financial decision made under stress, before you conclude that the problem was discipline or intelligence or planning, the more precise question is, what was the cognitive state in which that decision was made, and who was positioned to profit from that state? The moment you are most convinced you are thinking clearly under pressure, check how long the pressure has been running. What financial decision have you looked back on, not the impulsive one, the careful one, and still not able to explain? Drop it in the comments. The conditions that impair financial thinking were not accidental. Neither was the timeline you were given for when financial pressure is supposed to end. Who drew that timeline, what it was built to serve, and who benefits from where they placed it, that is what we examine next.